Welcome to Conspiracy Theories Podcast. I'm your host, Noah Smith, and in today's episode, we ask a question that cuts to the heart of power itself. Who's really in charge? Beyond elections, beyond presidents, beyond parties, some say a hidden force manipulates the system from the shadows. It's a theory known as the deep state. And tonight, we trace its origins, the people entangled in its web, and whether there's any truth behind the whispers. The idea of a deep state did not emerge overnight. Its roots stretch back through a long and tangled history of mistrust between governments and the people they claim to serve. While the term itself has gained popularity in recent years, the concept is far older. It first appeared in reference to countries like Turkey, where elements within the military and intelligence community were believed to be secretly manipulating civilian governance. From there, the term evolved, adapted by theorists and commentators across the globe to describe similar hidden structures operating within other nations, including the United States. In America, suspicion of shadow power structures began almost as soon as the ink dried on the Constitution. Early political factions feared that unelected influences, particularly bankers, financiers, and foreign interests, could wield power behind closed doors. Andrew Jackson, who famously distrusted centralized banking, ran on a platform that warned of moneyed elites pulling the strings. Later, President Dwight D. Eisenhower's 1961 farewell address introduced the phrase military-industrial complex, warning of a growing, unchecked alliance between military contractors and government officials. Many historians see this speech as one of the earliest acknowledgments by a sitting president of something resembling a deep state. The Cold War further intensified concerns. As intelligence agencies like the CIA expanded their reach, Americans became increasingly uneasy about government secrecy. The Church Committee hearings in the 1970s revealed that U.S. intelligence agencies had engaged in widespread surveillance, assassination plots, and domestic propaganda. Though intended to rein in abuses, the revelations had an unintended effect. They solidified the public's belief that hidden powers operated beyond democratic oversight. In the decades that followed, these suspicions found new ground in the digital age. As the internet brought previously inaccessible information to light, conspiracy theories blossomed. Whistleblowers like Edward Snowden exposed the vast scope of NSA surveillance, confirming to many that the government was not just watching enemies abroad, but also its own citizens. At the same time, high-level bureaucrats, lobbyists, and consultants seemed to pass effortlessly between corporate boardrooms and federal agencies, creating a revolving door that critics claim diluted public accountability. This environment, ripe with mistrust, secrecy, and blurred lines, was the perfect incubator for the modern deep state narrative. According to proponents, the deep state is not a single organization, but rather a loose, evolving network of intelligence officials, defense contractors, senior bureaucrats, and global financial players who collectively ensure that government policy never strays too far from their interests. Critics argue that regardless of who holds office, this hidden apparatus remains untouched, continuing to operate behind the scenes, shaping domestic and foreign policy, managing media narratives, and safeguarding its own survival. It's important to note that this theory isn't confined to the political fringes. Across both conservative and progressive circles, there's a shared suspicion that elected officials are not the true decision makers. Phrases like permanent government and shadow state have entered mainstream discourse, especially during political transitions, controversial investigations, or sudden shifts in foreign policy. For many, the consistency of U.S. board strategies across vastly different administrations, from Bush to Obama to Trump to Biden, isn't a sign of bipartisan agreement, but of a deeper continuity they suspect is being dictated from somewhere else entirely. The idea of a deep state did not emerge overnight. Its roots stretch back through a long and tangled history of mistrust between governments and the people they claim to serve. While the term itself has gained popularity in recent years, the concept is far older. It first appeared in reference to countries like Turkey, where elements within the military and intelligence community were believed to be secretly manipulating civilian governance. From there, the term evolved, adapted by theorists and commentators across the globe to describe similar hidden structures operating within other nations, including the United States. In America, suspicion of shadow power structures began almost as soon as the ink dried on the Constitution. Early political factions feared that unelected influences, particularly bankers, financiers, and foreign interests, could wield power behind closed doors. Andrew Jackson, who famously distrusted centralized banking, ran on a platform that warned of moneyed elites pulling the strings. Later, President Dwight D. Eisenhower's 1961 farewell address introduced the phrase military-industrial complex, warning of a growing, unchecked alliance between military contractors and government officials. Many historians see this speech as one of the earliest acknowledgments by a sitting president of something resembling a deep state. The Cold War further intensified concerns. As intelligence agencies like the CIA expanded their reach, Americans became increasingly uneasy about government secrecy. The Church Committee hearings in the 1970s revealed that U.S. intelligence agencies had engaged in widespread surveillance, assassination plots, and domestic propaganda. Though intended to rein in abuses, the revelations had an unintended effect. They solidified the public's belief that hidden powers operated beyond democratic oversight. In the decades that followed, these suspicions found new ground in the digital age. As the internet brought previously inaccessible information to light, conspiracy theories blossomed. Whistleblowers like Edward Snowden exposed the vast scope of NSA surveillance, confirming to many that the government was not just watching enemies abroad, but also its own citizens. At the same time, high-level bureaucrats, lobbyists, and consultants seemed to pass effortlessly between corporate boardrooms and federal agencies, creating a revolving door that critics claimed diluted public accountability. This environment, ripe with mistrust, secrecy, and blurred lines, was the perfect incubator for the modern deep state narrative. According to proponents, the deep state is not a single organization, but rather a loose, evolving network of intelligence officials, defense contractors, senior bureaucrats, and global financial players who collectively ensure that government policy never strays too far from their interests. Critics argue that regardless of who holds office, this hidden apparatus remains untouched, continuing to operate behind the scenes, shaping domestic and foreign policy, managing media narratives, and safeguarding its own survival. It's important to note that this theory isn't confined to the political fringes. Across both conservative and progressive circles, there's a shared suspicion that elected officials are not the true decision makers. Phrases like permanent government and shadow state have entered mainstream discourse, especially during political transitions, controversial investigations, or sudden shifts in foreign policy. For many, the consistency of U.S. sports strategies across vastly different administrations, from Bush to Obama to Trump to Biden, isn't a sign of bipartisan agreement, but of a deeper continuity they suspect is being dictated from somewhere else entirely. As the deep state theory gained momentum, certain individuals and events began to stand out as flashpoints, moments when believers pointed to what they saw as clear evidence of manipulation by unseen forces. At the center of many of these narratives are the intelligence agencies, particularly the CIA, FBI, and NSA. Critics argue that these agencies, while nominally under executive control, often operate with a degree of autonomy that makes meaningful oversight difficult. With access to vast surveillance networks, black budgets, and covert operations capabilities, they have been portrayed not merely as tools of the government, but as power brokers in their own right. J. Edgar Hoover, the first director of the FBI, is frequently cited as an early example of this unchecked power. For nearly 50 years, Hoover held his position through multiple presidencies, amassing secret files on political figures, civil rights leaders, and celebrities. His ability to collect and potentially weaponize information gave him immense leverage, and many historians believe that presidents feared him. This dynamic, where unelected officials hold sway over elected leaders, embodies one of the core fears that drives deep state theory. Another figure often mentioned is John Brennan, the former CIA director under President Obama. His continued presence in national security discussions, even after leaving office, along with his media commentary and political involvement, has drawn criticism from those who believe that intelligence officials should not have such lasting influence. Likewise, James Comey and the FBI's investigation into Donald Trump's 2016 campaign became a central point of contention. Supporters of Trump accused Comey and others of orchestrating a soft coup from within the system, a claim that echoed classic deep state fears. Organizations and gatherings have also become lightning rods. The Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, and the Bilderberg Group are all frequently cited in deep state discussions. Though these organizations are, by definition, think tanks or forums for elite discussion, conspiracy theorists argue that their members, who often include high-ranking politicians, CEOs, and media moguls, serve as the architects of a globalist agenda that overrides national sovereignty. The secrecy surrounding these meetings and the overlap in membership between powerful institutions fuel speculation that real policy decisions are being made far from public scrutiny. Events like the Iraq War further cemented these ideas. In the early 2000s, the Bush administration's push for war based on flawed intelligence about weapons of mass destruction led many to question whether hidden agendas were guiding foreign policy. The revolving door between government posts and lucrative positions in defense contracting, particularly at firms like Halliburton and Lockheed Martin, raised serious concerns about profit motives influencing war decisions. Critics argued that even when public sentiment opposed military action, the machinery of war kept turning, seemingly immune to democratic restraint. Even in domestic affairs, sudden policy shifts and bureaucratic resistance have raised eyebrows. When President Trump signed executive orders or announced controversial moves, leaks, internal memos, and public resignations often followed. Some viewed these as principled pushback from within the system, while others saw them as evidence of an entrenched bureaucracy refusing to cede control. The impeachment proceedings, Mueller investigation, and media coverage of Trump's presidency were frequently cited as coordinated efforts by entrenched actors to undermine his agenda, an accusation that became central to the deep state narrative among his supporters. Whether these individuals and events truly point to an organized hidden power structure or simply reflect the messy nature of modern governance remains deeply contested. But for many, these patterns, autonomous agencies, unelected influence, revolving doors, and coordinated resistance, appear too systematic to be coincidence. They become, in the eyes of believers, the fingerprints of a deeper authority that transcends the visible machinery of government. Proponents of the deep state theory often cite a wide range of claims and pieces of evidence they believe point to the existence of a hidden governing structure. One of the most frequently referenced elements is the existence of continuity of government programs, highly classified emergency protocols developed during the Cold War designed to ensure national survival in the event of nuclear war or other catastrophic events. These plans involve designated relocation sites, secret communication systems, and even alternate leadership chains that bypass the traditional democratic process. Facilities like Mount Weather and the Cheyenne Mountain Complex are real, confirmed locations tied to these programs, and their secrecy continues to fuel speculation about who might actually be in control during a national emergency. Another key piece of evidence cited is the black budget, classified government spending that's not subject to public oversight. In 2013, Edward Snowden revealed that the United States spent over $50 billion annually on top secret intelligence programs. These funds, which are not openly detailed in the federal budget, support covert operations, surveillance programs, and technologies unknown to the public. For deep state theorists, this kind of shadow financing is a red flag, proof of a government operating partially in the dark, with vast sums of money unaccounted for by Congress or the people. There's also a heavy focus on media influence. Critics argue that major news outlets are not truly independent, but serve as mouthpieces for intelligence agencies or corporate interests. One of the most commonly cited examples is Operation Mockingbird, a real Cold War-era program in which the CIA allegedly recruited journalists to influence both domestic and foreign media narratives. Although it was said to have ended in the 1970s, suspicions remain that similar efforts continue under new guises. Today, claims that former intelligence officials serve as commentators on major networks are viewed as indicators that media narratives are shaped by the same powerful interests accused of manipulating government policy. Data manipulation and surveillance also play a central role in the deep state narrative. The revelations from Snowden not only confirmed that the NSA had been collecting phone metadata on millions of Americans, but also suggested a deeply embedded intelligence network with the capability to monitor private communications without a warrant. Supporters of the theory argue that this mass surveillance infrastructure is not merely a tool for national security, but a mechanism of control, capable of identifying, neutralizing, or discrediting dissenters. Another recurring point is the systematic targeting of political outsiders, figures who attempt to challenge entrenched systems. Whether they come from the right or the left, often find themselves facing sudden investigations, damaging leaks, or coordinated media attacks. This pattern, according to deep state believers, is not accidental. They argue it's a form of institutional self-preservation, where the system works to eliminate threats to its own continuity. From this perspective, it's not ideology that drives opposition. It's the perceived risk to long-established networks of power and influence. Foreign policy decisions are also scrutinized for signs of manipulation. Critics highlight how, regardless of administration, certain actions, like military interventions, support for specific allies, or opposition to particular regimes, remain curiously consistent. They argue that these patterns suggest an agenda that transcends elected leadership. The theory posits that presidents and legislators are often pressured, influenced, or simply overridden by security advisors, Pentagon officials, and unelected strategists whose decisions align with a long-term geopolitical framework hidden from the public eye. All of these pieces, the secret budgets, emergency protocols, media shaping, mass surveillance, and resistance to political disruptors, form what supporters believe is a mosaic of coordinated control. Each element, on its own, may be explainable, but together, they argue, these patterns reveal a structure that is insulated from democratic processes, largely invisible and exceptionally resistant to change. For those who believe, this is the deep state in action, not a myth, but a modern system of silent governance. While the surface-level evidence behind deep state claims may seem compelling to some, a deeper examination reveals that many of the core claims rely heavily on inference, pattern recognition, and circumstantial associations rather than verifiable proof. The lack of transparency in certain government functions, such as black budgets and classified operations, undeniably creates a fertile ground for speculation. But evaluating the legitimacy of these claims requires a methodical look at how such evidence is interpreted, contested, and contextualized by different observers. Take the concept of the black budget, for example. While it is a real element of U.S. government spending, primarily funding intelligence and defense programs, its existence alone does not confirm the presence of a secret ruling cabal. National security experts argue that the classified nature of these expenditures is necessary to maintain operational secrecy, protect intelligence methods, and prevent adversaries from gaining strategic insights. The vast amounts involved, more than $80 billion in some years, are indeed alarming to watchdog groups, but oversight committees in Congress do review these expenditures, albeit in closed sessions. Critics of deep state theories emphasize that secrecy does not automatically equate to conspiracy. Similarly, continuity of government plans, while rarely discussed in detail, have been acknowledged by multiple administrations. These measures were most notably activated during the 9/11 attacks, when key government figures were dispersed to secure locations. However, there is little public evidence that such programs have ever overridden the normal democratic process or placed unelected individuals in power. Supporters of the deep state theory point to the potential for abuse, while skeptics stress the intended purpose of these protocols: to preserve governance during a crisis, not to supplant it. The involvement of intelligence officials in media commentary has also raised flags for conspiracy theorists. Critics ask why so many former CIA or NSA operatives find roles as network analysts or newspaper contributors. However, defenders of this practice argue that their firsthand experience is valuable in interpreting complex global events for the public. The question then becomes one of perspective, whether their presence indicates influence over narratives or simply reflects a public appetite for expert insight. Analyzing claims of targeted political sabotage presents another area of contention. While there are certainly high-profile cases of leaks and investigations aimed at certain political figures, proving a centralized effort by a coordinated deep state remains difficult. The bureaucracy is vast, composed of thousands of civil servants, law enforcement agents, and analysts with differing views. Inconsistencies and resistance within government institutions can stem from genuine legal concerns, interagency conflict, or bureaucratic inertia rather than organized opposition. The Snowden revelations are often treated as undeniable evidence of deep state operations given the shocking extent of unauthorized surveillance. But even here, the interpretation is contested. Some view it as confirmation that the intelligence community operates beyond control, while others see it as a wake-up call that led to much-needed reforms, including the USA Freedom Act, which limited certain data collection practices. Rather than confirming the existence of a monolithic deep state, these incidents might simply reveal a fragmented and at times poorly managed security apparatus. Ultimately, one of the biggest challenges in verifying deep state claims is their reliance on secrecy itself. By definition, a hidden power structure cannot be directly observed, making it inherently difficult to either prove or disprove. This ambiguity allows the theory to persist because every unexplained leak, classified document, or covert operation becomes potential proof. But it also raises the danger of confirmation bias, where believers fit new events into a pre-existing framework rather than evaluating them independently. For many scholars and political analysts, the real issue may not be a hidden government, but rather a government that has grown too complex, too secretive, and too detached from public accountability. In that sense, the deep state may function more as a metaphor, a symbol for systemic opacity and elite continuity than a literal conspiracy. But to those who insist that real power lies beyond the reach of elections, it is more than metaphor. It is a warning. And for them, every closed-door meeting, redacted document, and sudden political downfall adds one more brick to an invisible empire. Critics of the deep state theory argue that many of its claims crumble under scrutiny, pointing to a lack of cohesive structure, motive, or demonstrable coordination. From their perspective, what believers interpret as signs of a shadow government are more accurately explained by bureaucratic complexity, institutional inertia, and the natural conflicts that arise in a sprawling democratic system. They contend that assigning hidden intent to every leak, policy reversal, or intelligence failure risks oversimplifying how government actually functions. One of the main arguments against the deep state theory is that it attributes far too much confidence and unity to government institutions that in reality are often fragmented and at odds with one another. Agencies like the CIA, FBI, NSA, and Pentagon operate under separate mandates, budgets, and leadership structures. Their agendas do not always align, and their histories are filled with examples of interagency rivalry, turf wars, and conflicting intelligence assessments. Far from being a seamless cabal, these agencies frequently compete, miscommunicate, and act independently, sometimes with disastrous consequences. Another point raised by skeptics is that conspiracy theories like the deep state often fail to explain why, if such a structure exists, it would allow political outsiders to come to power at all. Figures like Ronald Reagan, Barack Obama, Bernie Sanders, and Donald Trump all disrupted the political landscape in ways that a truly omnipotent deep state would presumably prevent. The fact that outsider candidates can ascend to high office, challenge entrenched policies, and at times overhaul institutional norms suggests that the system is more porous and less centrally controlled than the theory assumes. Furthermore, many of the actions attributed to the deep state can also be explained through well-documented political mechanisms such as lobbying, campaign financing, and institutional resistance to change. Elected officials often struggle to implement sweeping reforms not because of shadowy sabotage, but because of legitimate legal constraints, congressional gridlock, or pushback from career civil servants who interpret the law differently. In this view, the friction within government is not evidence of a hidden agenda. It's a sign of checks and balances functioning, however imperfectly. Academics also warn that the deep state narrative risks becoming a catch-all explanation that discourages civic engagement and undermines trust in institutions. When people believe that unseen powers nullify their vote or that policy is controlled by invisible actors, it fosters political apathy and paranoia. In extreme cases, this mindset can justify violence or insurrection based on the belief that normal democratic processes are no longer valid. The January 6th Capitol riot is frequently cited as an example of how belief in a stolen system can escalate into real-world consequences. Additionally, historians caution against viewing the deep state theory in a vacuum, arguing that it is part of a broader pattern in human history where complex societal issues are attributed to conspiratorial forces. From the Illuminati to Freemasons to modern globalist elites, societies often construct invisible enemies to explain rapid change, loss of control, or perceived injustice. These narratives gain traction especially during times of upheaval, when institutions falter and traditional explanations fail to satisfy public anxiety. Media scholars add that the rise of social media has accelerated the spread of such theories by creating echo chambers where information is curated to confirm existing beliefs. Algorithms prioritize engagement over accuracy, allowing emotionally charged claims to outpace careful analysis. In this environment, the deep state becomes less of a theory and more of a digital mythos, flexible, viral, and self-reinforcing. Despite these critiques, belief in the deep state persists across a wide spectrum of political ideologies. Some view it as a literal structure, others see it as symbolic of broader systemic issues, and some simply invoke it as shorthand for institutional resistance to rapid political change. Regardless of the lens through which it's viewed, the theory has carved out a permanent space in modern discourse, and efforts to debunk it often do little to dislodge its grip. For many, the absence of proof is not evidence of falsehood, but validation of how well hidden the truth must be. Beyond the claims and counterclaims lies a deeper question. Why does the deep state theory resonate so powerfully across societies, ideologies, and generations? The answer may lie not just in politics or power, but in psychology. At its core, the deep state theory is a lens through which people attempt to understand a chaotic, confusing world. It offers an explanation for the inexplicable, a structure behind the seemingly random, and a culprit when outcomes don't align with public will. In this way, the theory serves as more than political speculation. It functions as a cultural coping mechanism. Modern society is marked by increasing complexity. Government systems are layered, sprawling, and often opaque. Legislation passes with riders and exceptions, executive decisions unfold behind closed doors, and judicial rulings can pivot national policy overnight. For many citizens, the mechanics of power are both inaccessible and unintelligible. Into this void steps the deep state narrative, an elegant if unsettling explanation that says, there is a reason things feel out of your control. It's not incompetence or bureaucracy, it's intent. In times of uncertainty or crisis, this narrative only gains strength. Economic recessions, terror attacks, pandemics, and war all strain public trust. When institutions fail to prevent disaster or respond effectively, suspicion naturally follows. The deep state theory absorbs these failures into its architecture, framing them not as missteps, but as part of a larger pattern of hidden manipulation or sabotage. It transforms frustration into focus, giving believers a defined adversary. This phenomenon is amplified by political polarization. In deeply divided societies, each side often views the other as not just wrong, but corrupt or malevolent. The idea of a deep state provides a justification for that belief. Progressives may see it as a military-industrial intelligence machine that overrides reform. Conservatives may frame it as a bureaucratic elite obstructing populism. Both narratives meet in the same place, a sense that true control lies elsewhere, beyond reach. The deep state theory also satisfies a psychological need for coherence. Human beings are pattern-seeking creatures. Faced with vast amounts of information, some contradictory, some frightening, we instinctively look for unifying narratives. Conspiracy theories like the deep state offer a simplified framework. They turn complex geopolitical forces, market dynamics, and institutional inertia into a story with characters, motives, and consequences. This makes the world more understandable, even if it's more sinister. For some, believing in the deep state also restores a kind of agency. Ironically, acknowledging a hidden elite may feel more empowering than accepting that life is shaped by randomness or ineffectual leadership. If there's a cabal behind the scenes, then change is at least possible. It suggests there's a lever of power to uncover or resist. In contrast, admitting that government dysfunction stems from chaotic systems or voter apathy may feel more disheartening, even hopeless. Culturally, the theory has become more than a political position. It's a shared mythology. It appears in television dramas, blockbuster films, internet forums, and fringe literature. The image of the puppet master pulling strings from the shadows is now deeply ingrained in modern storytelling. It satisfies both entertainment and existential questions, merging fantasy with fear in a way few other ideas can. But this cultural ubiquity comes with consequences. As the deep state idea spreads and mutates, it risks becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy. Public trust in institutions continues to erode. Officials are accused of malice rather than mistake. And in the absence of trust, democratic systems begin to falter, not because of hidden elites, but because the people no longer believe those systems work at all. The deep state theory has not only influenced individual beliefs, it has also reshaped the broader media and political landscape. Over the past 2 decades, mainstream and alternative media outlets alike have increasingly invoked the idea to explain political conflicts, bureaucratic pushback, or the persistence of unpopular policies. As a result, what was once a fringe narrative has become a regular feature in public discourse, referenced by elected officials, commentators, and activists from across the ideological spectrum. This normalization has profound implications for how power is perceived, contested, and portrayed. In politics, the deep state has become a rhetorical weapon. Candidates and parties invoke it to frame opposition, justify setbacks, or discredit investigations. When leaders face resistance from within government agencies, they sometimes attribute it to sabotage by entrenched insiders. This framing can be effective in mobilizing support, particularly among voters who already feel alienated from traditional institutions. But it also introduces a dangerous ambiguity. If every policy disagreement or bureaucratic delay is seen as proof of a hidden agenda, the space for reasoned debate begins to erode. This has been especially evident in moments of national tension. During major events like presidential impeachments, contested elections, or high-profile judicial battles, accusations of deep state interference become louder and more polarized. Media outlets on both sides amplify these narratives, some to confirm them, others to ridicule them. But the end result is the same. The public absorbs the idea that the visible government may not be the true seat of power. In this way, the theory acts like a shadow cast across every major political decision, subtly undermining legitimacy. In the media sphere, former intelligence and military officials often appear as analysts or contributors, leading critics to suggest that news narratives are shaped by people with long-standing ties to secretive institutions. Whether these appearances represent expert analysis or institutional messaging remains a subject of debate. But for believers in the deep state, these voices symbolize confirmation that the very figures they suspect of manipulating power are now publicly guiding public opinion. Pop culture further reinforces these ideas. Television shows, films, and books frequently portray governments as controlled by clandestine forces, whether corrupt corporations, secret societies, or rogue agencies. These portrayals blend fiction and fact, dramatizing real-world fears into digestible narratives. For viewers already suspicious of institutional power, such entertainment doesn't just reflect their worldview, it strengthens it. The boundary between storytelling and belief becomes increasingly porous. Social media, with its decentralized platforms and personalized algorithms, accelerates this effect. Viral posts, out-of-context clips, and emotional narratives often eclipse slower, more nuanced reporting. Misinformation can spread faster than corrections, and belief communities form rapidly around speculative content. In this environment, the deep state theory thrives not because it is proven, but because it is adaptable, emotionally resonant, and resistant to rebuttal. But perhaps the most significant consequence is the erosion of institutional trust. When a critical mass of citizens believes that elected officials are mere figureheads, that court rulings are orchestrated, or that law enforcement acts on hidden orders, the foundation of democratic society begins to crack. The deep state theory, regardless of its truth, becomes a corrosive force. It doesn't just question authority, it delegitimizes it. And yet, this widespread suspicion also reveals a public hunger for transparency, accountability, and participation. In a world increasingly defined by surveillance, global finance, and rapid technological change, many people feel left behind, unheard, and unseen. The deep state narrative, for all its controversy, speaks to that void. It says your instincts are right. Power is hidden. But in doing so, it also casts a long shadow over efforts to build consensus, restore trust, or govern openly. Whether real or symbolic, the deep state has taken root in the public imagination, and its influence shows no sign of fading. While much of the discourse surrounding the deep state focuses on bureaucratic inertia, intelligence overreach, and media manipulation, the fringes of the theory venture into far more speculative territory. In these outer layers, the deep state is no longer just a metaphor for opaque governance. It becomes something far more sinister, vast, and global in scope. These versions of the theory incorporate elements of transhumanism, occult symbolism, extraterrestrial influence, and even interdimensional control, turning a political suspicion into an all-encompassing worldview. One of the more persistent fringe variations connects the deep state to secret societies, groups like the Illuminati, Freemasons, or Skull and Bones. In this narrative, the deep state is not merely an alignment of interests among bureaucrats and corporate elites, but a structured and ancient organization with its own rituals, agendas, and long-term plans for global dominance. These societies are said to operate within the world's most powerful institutions, embedding their members in key positions across government, finance, and media. Symbols etched in architecture, currency, and corporate logos are interpreted as veiled acknowledgments of their control. Another speculative claim ties the deep state to projects hidden within the defense and aerospace industries. Programs like DARPA and organizations such as Lockheed Martin's Skunk Works are viewed not only as innovators of cutting-edge technology, but as gatekeepers of suppressed knowledge. Theorists claim these entities have reverse-engineered alien technology recovered from crash sites, most famously Roswell, and have withheld advancements that could alter society. According to this view, energy sources, propulsion systems, and even mind control technologies have been hidden from the public to preserve elite control. The deep state, then, is not just political, it is technological and possibly non-human in origin. The CERN particle collider is another object of fascination. While officially a scientific instrument for probing the foundations of matter, fringe theorists suspect it has a darker function: the manipulation of time, space, or even reality itself. In this narrative, the deep state is experimenting with dimensional gateways and quantum manipulation, possibly to access alternate timelines or control the flow of events on a global scale. These ideas, while extreme, resonate with those already convinced that traditional explanations for world events are insufficient. Even religion and metaphysics are folded into the most extreme interpretations. Some claim that the deep state is aligned with ancient deities or demonic forces, drawing from rituals, bloodlines, and esoteric knowledge to maintain power. The concept of loosh, a form of emotional or spiritual energy harvested from human suffering, is cited as a reason for perpetual war, media fear cycles, and the exploitation of children. In this worldview, the deep state becomes not just a political construct, but a spiritual parasite feeding on humanity. There are also those who believe the deep state is preparing for a controlled disclosure of extraterrestrial life. This theory suggests that global elites have long known of alien existence and have coordinated with non-human entities to manage the planet. Gradual leaks, media portrayals, and government admissions are seen as part of a strategy to acclimate the public before a staged or manipulated revelation. Whether to unite humanity under a single government, justify new technology, or instill global fear, this narrative places the deep state at the center of a cosmic chessboard. While mainstream analysts dismiss these claims as science fiction, their traction reflects a deep undercurrent of mistrust and existential anxiety. The fringe becomes appealing not necessarily because it is provable, but because it presents a larger narrative that makes the chaos of the modern world feel intentional rather than random. For those who adopt these beliefs, the deep state is no longer an abstract theory. It is the skeleton key to understanding every unexplained event, every shift in power, every fracture in society. And once that key is accepted, the door never quite closes again. Whether viewed through the lens of political intrigue, institutional inertia, or cosmic manipulation, the deep state theory has become one of the most pervasive and adaptive narratives of the modern era. It thrives not because it can be conclusively proven, but because it offers a story that resonates with a world increasingly defined by mistrust, opacity, and disconnection. At its heart, the theory reflects a central question that echoes across every society: who holds the real power? Across the last century, from Cold War spycraft to covert wars, financial collapses, pandemics, and digital surveillance, the perception has steadily grown that democratic processes are no longer enough to shape the future. Elections feel inconsequential when policies remain unchanged. Presidents come and go, yet certain agendas seem to endure. For those who believe in the deep state, these patterns are not coincidences or results of structural inertia. They are evidence of something deeper, more deliberate, and more insulated than public governance. And even among skeptics, the theory lingers as a metaphor. It articulates real concerns about government secrecy, corporate influence, the militarization of policy, and the revolving door between public office and private enterprise. It gives shape to vague anxieties about losing control over one's environment, over one's country, and ultimately over one's destiny. The deep state, then, becomes a symbol of power out of reach, of questions without answers, of systems too big to understand and too closed to challenge. Its staying power is not just a reflection of public paranoia. It's also a symptom of institutional failure. When transparency falters, when accountability disappears, and when leaders speak in contradictions, the vacuum left behind is filled by stories. And the deep state theory is one of the most compelling stories modern civilization has to offer. It provides a villain, a motive, and a network, a way to connect the dots between the confusing realities of modern life. In the absence of clarity, it offers coherence. In the absence of trust, it offers suspicion. And in the absence of power, it offers resistance. But belief in such a force carries consequences. It encourages disengagement, framing all civic participation as futile. It corrodes faith in journalism, science, justice, and diplomacy. It fosters division, turning political disagreement into existential war. And it opens the door to extremism, because if one truly believes the system is irredeemably controlled, then any action against it becomes justifiable. Still, the theory persists because it speaks to something real, not necessarily in its claims, but in its emotional truth. People feel powerless. They see inequality rise, policies stagnate, and voices ignored. They feel lied to, misled, surveilled, and sidelined. Whether the deep state exists as described, or whether it's a reflection of deeper cultural and psychological fractures, its impact is undeniable. In the end, the question may not be whether the deep state exists, but why so many people believe it does, and what that says about the world we live in. Because behind every conspiracy theory lies a deeper story, one about power, one about trust, and one about the future we're trying to reclaim. Thanks for listening. This has been another episode of Conspiracy Theories Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, follow us wherever you get your podcasts. To support the show, subscribe to Conspiracy Theories Podcast on Spotify. Subscribe now.